Welcome back to another episode of Leadership Roundtable. Today, I am joined by another all-star cast, and we're going to dive into a pretty important leadership subject that often goes ignored. I'm joined today by some friends that you've seen before, some familiar faces. I'm going to toss it over to Meredith Frey to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Meredith Fry. John, Kevin, Michael, and Kevin, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. Mr. Phillips.
Yes, Kevin Phillips. Happy to be back. Just a quick excitement to learn more about this topic and discuss this topic. Very excited to engage with the panel.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. And then, Mike, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and then kicking us off.
All right. Michael Donito. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in New York. I'm also a psychotherapist, and I'm the director of a large mental health program in New York City. Um, so the topic. So the topic is struggles, barriers, and supports needed for new supervisors in the field. So this is specifically focused on people moving from line staff into supervisory roles. Um, with the topic, it's the main things, and I'm speaking from the human services field that I see as barriers is a lack of a formal training, or if a formal training's put in, it's put in sometimes months after the supervisor has started, or it's spread over such a long period of time. And I'm thinking this like from a military standpoint, they sent us to leadership courses before they promoted us. Well, unless you were in war, but usually like 95% of the time, you're in a leadership course before you were promoted. So you were given those skills. So when you were moved into that role, you had the basic knowledge, and then you had your mentorship following after that. In the human services field, what I see happen more often than not is you're promoted, and then if the agency has a leadership training or supervisory training, you're put into that training when the next rotation is. So if you're promoted and it's usually quarterly. So if you're promoted in April 2nd, that training started April 1st, you're not going to get into it until June. So it's a lot of stuff like that, and it's put onto the directors to lead to teach and mentor. But it's you got a director who's got how X number of staff and then X number of other responsibilities. And I'm going to be honest with you, speaking from experience, I had a new supervisor that for some reason their supervision always fell during a critical event. So it's like I'm trying to shove this into a 30-minute slot someplace versus an hour and a half supervision. And they're pretty much left to rely on their pairs, which thank God I had a solid supervisory staff that was able to help pick up the slack and help the worker. I guess kind of to set the framework of some of the things I'm thinking that I see as common barriers is holding people accountable because you went from being a line staff to sometimes leading your pairs or your former pairs. So now you're holding people accountable that have that kind or that know you. The concept of progressive discipline or disciplinary action for not meeting metrics, doing what needs to be done, as well as starting to hold that leadership and managerial cap, because being a leader is two different things. It's not just one aspect.
I love this topic just because it's not spoken about enough. This is a problem in every organization, going from peer to peer to leader to peer. And there's a new dynamic that I think is often missed in organizations because, all right, how am I supposed to work now? What are my new responsibilities? How does this change affect everyone in the room? And that's never touched on. Instead, it's all right, these are your direct reports and these are your responsibilities. Go. And when you miss out on the human element, that's a huge problem. And so I think digging deeper, I'm looking at, okay, how can you leverage your past experiences? What can you what can you embrace because you used to work peer to peer to now leader to peer. And so I always focus on using that tacit knowledge that you've gained from your experience. You have a very unique skill set in that you have done exactly what the people are still doing, your direct reports are, so you know the battle that they're facing. You can embrace that skill set, that experience to deliver value and kind of be that voice for those people because you know exactly what they're doing. And so for me, that's what I've always tried to highlight as well as help people understand, hey, this can be a huge advantage for you.
If I could just add one more thought, I'm sorry, Meredith, before it gets over to you. I don't mean to cut you off here. To kind of go off of our conversation from what I believe would be the episode that was aired before this, this is an amazing retention tool, morale booster, to see your pair or for other staff to see their pairs moving up, right? To see that the agency, the company, the industry is investing in their own versus bringing outside. So kind of there is also that benefit, and to kind of throw the carrot at the end of the stick of why an agency should look at this is you're going to get solid staff that know the job, right? They know the job that the people that are under them are supposed to be doing or are very, very familiar with it. And they know the organizational culture, policies, procedures. So it's a lot easier than training an outside person on all that stuff, plus mentorship and the education. Sorry, I wanted to throw that in there, and that wasn't even planned.
Some
I've been
bonus
started
thoughts.
talking. I'm like, oh yeah, there's other benefits.
No, Mike, I think, and Kevin, you both hit it right on the head. You're so right. There's a beauty in change. It is the scariest thing that's bound to happen, but it's the most predictable thing. That's the only thing you can guarantee in life is, well, one of them is change. And it's welcomed in my world. Even if it's uncomfortable, I think there's an opportunity for everyone to grow. I think if your leadership is able to see that and they trust in you to take that next step, you need to grab it as tight as you can and just go. Even if you're uncomfortable, you're not sure, you're insecure, because it is scary. It's not always fun. And sometimes they'll move you to a different department to go be that supervisory role, but oftentimes they may keep you as a peer. And something I've carried over with me from the military is that initial counseling. And we may not call it that, but all of my bosses have done that. One of them is prior service, so he does have that background. But it's something that sets the standard straight for me right there. There's no question as to what my responsibility is. I know who I'm reporting to. I know their expectations, and I know what they expect of me. And while I don't have a direct report, I am still in charge of leading a team of stakeholders to get to the end result, which is, in my world, building a solar energy center, which takes about 2 years from start to finish. So it's a long time, and there's periodic breaks in between where you're not doing much. So how am I holding people accountable? How do I get them to get the work done for me? Why am I important to them? So it's understanding that and figuring that out so we can all cohesively move forward and get this done exponentially. So I love this topic. I'm excited to dig into it more, but that's just where I kind of start the line is. Try to get those initial counselings out to get the understanding, but I also understand that in some agencies, there is a lack of time and a lack of resources. So how can we figure that out internally to move forward?
Thank you for that, Meredith. So, Mike, while you were doing the introduction, I wrote down a couple things that I'm curious what the three of you think of this. So, number one, I want to point out by absolute coincidence, this is an all veteran staff or all veteran cast. So, thank you all for your service. The other thing I wanted to point out was, you mentioned the classes. And in the military, you have a strategic plan for how someone gets promoted. There's, a variety of different points and classes and other things that you have to check the box before you're promotable. And in the civilian sector, that just doesn't always exist. A lot of times someone's getting promoted because of some type of event. And unfortunately, it's almost always because the person before them didn't perform well or didn't like their job and left, and a vacancy was created. And in most cases, from what I've seen, um, it's not always the best person who gets the job. Sometimes it's the person who just didn't quit or get fired before gets thrust into a leadership role, which it is a gigantic strategic failure every time. There's very few times where I've seen that work out well. And I think your definitions of success can be different about that. And then the one thing I'm super this is the thing I'm absolutely most curious about, because I think there's two paths forward um, when you go from being on the team to being in charge of the team. There's in my vision, there's two paths forward. There's probably more, but I've seen it go from the point where the person very successfully steps forward and their leadership is seen from a mile away and everybody knows that person's next because they just stand out. They're always the leader, and it's a seamless transition for them to step up and take over. Then there's the leader who, for whatever reason, we're going in this case, we're going to pretend that they deserved the promotion or they earned the promotion, but they never truly take charge of the team, and the team doesn't really respect him as the leader. And so that's the thing I'm most curious to hear, because I'm sure I would be surprised if from the three of you, if you've never seen those two examples before.
It was relatively earned, but I guess it was more of leading my own people. Um, and it went well on paper, it went well visually, but some of the barriers I recall having are, and this was in the military, John, where I was in the infantry still. I went out drinking with these people. These were people that we were getting in trouble together. We were doing all that stuff, and now I'm telling you, you got to tie your boots and you got to make sure you shine them and you got to press your uniform. And they're like, dude, and I remember being put in that position, and that was kind of like a barrier within my leadership, right? Because I had to overcome being their buddy one week, and then the next week, now I'm your squad leader. Now now we got to get this done. And well, I was a team leader, not a squad leader. Sorry. Now I'm your team leader. So I do recall that being a huge barrier. But the way I got through that was with great mentorship from my squad leader at that point, talking to me about it, because it was something that I was comfortable to bring up. I was like, hey, I'm telling, Joe over here he's got to do this stuff. And he looks at me like, really? And, sure, it gets done, but it's done half-ass. And, like, how do I work through this? How do I get through this? And it's more of redefining who you are. It's not so in the civilian world, what they say is, you change your appearance. That way it starts changing the perception, and then you can always come back. Military, we're wearing the same uniform, whether, the only thing that changes is what's on your collar. Oh, sorry. For the new military, I guess what's on your chest. At my time, it was what's on your collar. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, it was a little harder because even with my current role, I went from being a pair to being the leader, but I went from wearing, like khakis and a dress shirt to wearing a full suit. And just the way I was viewed, or from being a pair as a supervisor to being the director, I was viewed in a different way. And even the way people approached me the first day I walked in a suit was already different. Right? Like they didn't come up to me like, "Hey, Mike, how was your weekend? How's everything?" It was already, okay, Mike's in a suit, something's going on, and it was easier. So yeah, but I mean, by the grace of God, every time it eventually worked out for me. But there was that struggle to where when I become a leader of a place that didn't know me, I walk right in, they already don't know who I am, and I can create my for lack of better terms, persona, right there, and then I could tailor it back to what's effective for that team.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. What's effective for that team? Because I think, as you touched on, the different industries, the different backgrounds, that every team will react differently. And I've been on teams, pretty diverse teams, where in different levels of the organization, you had blue collar workers and white collar workers, and then you had skilled trades, and then you had soft skills. People who dealt with uh, customer service type issues. And I've been fortunate in my career to have led all of the teams, and I can tell you that the things that you have to do when you're dealing with a team of people who make their living using soft skills versus the things you have to do when you are leading a team of people who earn their money with their back or their arms, twisting wrenches, building things, moving things. It's different. And quite frankly, I've always been kind of able to bend and move and understand. And I think part of it is because I came up through all of those channels and I've done all of that work myself. But when you touch on the physical appearance difference, that's a huge tool to be able to say, hey, things are different today than they were yesterday. And so and I don't know from either Kevin or Meredith if you've had a different experience, and Meredith being the most recent transitionee from the military to the civilian world. But that I think is a powerful tool for an up and coming leader, is to be able to say, okay, how do I lead without using my title? How do I show these team members why they should follow me? For me, I will never forget my ROTC experience where I just absolutely refused to comply. And there were kids that were probably 5 years younger than me, trying to pretend like they knew what happened, or what the real Army world was like. And I was absolutely probably the biggest jerk to a lot of those kids coming from active duty into ROTC, not realizing the absolute powerful moment that I had there to help them build their leadership skills. And the truth is, they weren't bad leaders to begin with. They were working very hard. But I go back to that example now to say, the strategic vision that the military has in the ROTC program is genius, because every week a new leader is in charge. And ROTC is grading you not just on how well you lead, but they're also grading you on how well you follow. So I always go back to that example myself when I say, okay, if I'm in a situation where I'm not the leader, I'm a team member, and my individual contribution is going to help the team, how do I be the best follower I can be to make that leader as successful as possible? But when you're the leader, not everybody's thinking that way. So anyway, I just Meredith, if I remember correctly, did you come up through the ROTC ranks?
I did not. I joined a little bit later after college. I was 25 when I went in. I went through OCS. And luckily for me, I had a lot of prior service guys and gals in my class who I clung to, and I just picked their brains. You were prior enlisted. What do you expect from an officer when they show up? Because, when you think about it, me coming in as a second lieutenant, that platoon's probably already seen 3 or 4 of me by the time I get there. They're just like, okay, it's just another name, whatever. They'll be gone in a year or 18 months or whatever your timeline looks like. And that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, was figure out, okay, oh my goodness, basic training's over, OCS is over, bullet's over, okay, now it's showtime. What do I do? And I took a platoon immediately. I was so blessed, blessed and cursed at the same time, but I had to figure it out. Now, luckily, I had my spouse, my husband was in, and he was already at Fort Drum, so I kind of had an idea of how I needed to approach it, and that was getting down, getting under the trucks with the platoon, going out on the rocks with them. You do everything that they do, and I promise you it pays off. But it's different because in the civilian sector, in corporate America, you're not going to go do that. There's just, I'm in a different role here. So I had to figure that out. And it was intimidating at first. luckily the company I joined, it takes about a year to get your feet really wet and to understand what you're doing. So they had me observed for 5 months. I didn't touch any meetings for 5 months. I was very, very lucky. Had a very great team who allowed me to take my time to kind of settle in. I got to observe how other leaders ran their meetings, and I picked a little bit from each one and said, okay, this is how I think we can create some buy-in. And I'm just now getting my groove. The 6 months last week that I started, I'm starting to run my own project meetings. I do have my supervisor in the room with me to keep me in line. And I like to get feedback as soon as the meeting's over to see how I did, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. But I constantly seek that feedback. So I latched on to my platoon sergeant, let me know what I said. Did I go too far? Am I doing too much? Is it too, where can I improve? And what am I doing well? So I know where to gauge that effort. So, but it's totally different. It's hard to figure out, but I think the best thing by being a leader is understanding the position that your subordinates or whoever you're overseeing, what position they're serving and how they've done it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Mike.
Just Meredith, if I go off where you were talking about getting underneath the trucks and everything with the line staff, you can do. It's just maybe for your industry you can't. I mean, I'm as the director, I've gone out and met with members in their homes with the staff. I've, and it also benefits a leader to know where John, like you were lucky, you said you came up through those ranks. If you haven't been in those ranks, to go and get in them and even observe. See what the job looks like, see what the struggles look like. And I'll be the first to tell you, I mean, I'm so far removed from the line staff, I have no clue what they're doing 9 times out of 10, probably, especially since the pandemic changed my industry so much in the way we provide services and the way services are delivered. So those barriers are not relatively fresh in my head, or, if something changes in their life, I have to rely on them to pass it up.
Mike, that's a great point. And I'm wondering if Kevin has a different perspective on this. So I'll piggyback off what Mike said, and I would actually challenge, and Meredith, I would like to know more about your specific industry and how this relates, because what I can tell you is in every single role I've ever had, I have always taken the opportunity to go. I hate to use the word because I'm certain some television network somewhere has it copyrighted, but the whole undercover boss thing. Well, I've never done that. I've never tried to go, and spy on my people. What I have done is I've put on their uniform and I've gone and lived a day in their life. And the only thing I ask them to do specifically if they were customer facing is don't tell the customer who I am. I'm just a worker. And I want to experience life the way you experience life. So I've done it in almost every role. I have put on a delivery driver's uniform and I've ridden in the middle, and I did all of the grunt work all day long. I did all the assembly stuff. In every single leadership role I've ever had in my entire career, I've been able to find a way to take a day and just go live a day in their life. And I credit some of my early leaders for encouraging, sometimes mandating it, so that you didn't have that moment where you're so far removed that you don't know what they're going through anymore. And so, Kevin, I'll toss that over to you because I know you've done a lot of research in this, and I'm in very honest question. You can tell me if I'm full of crap, but are there some examples where you think that would be an unrealistic challenge for a leader?
Sure. So 2 thoughts on that. First, we actually did that at one of the call centers that I worked at. So I was working as a manager, and our training staff, who was wonderful, put in place, all right, on Friday, the leaders are going to actually be on the front lines. And so they were making the calls to our customers. They were engaged in the back in the warehouse shipping orders, and they were moving through the entire process. And so even our top lead in the back working in the warehouse was suddenly on the front line packing boxes. And when I tell you, throughout the entire supply chain process, there was more change from that day than the entire previous 6 months, because it's one thing to hear, hey, we need to change this policy, this needs to move, we need to adapt. And leaders sometimes will say, yeah, but we can't because of ABC or XYZ. They felt the pain of their employees because they were actually in the midst of the struggle, and they realized, all right, this is a pain point, this disrupts operations, this is hindering my success. And so getting on the front lines and experiencing what your employees experience is extraordinary. And then the other thing that for me really your question sparked my kind of my thought process was leaders, especially first-time leaders, thinking that they need to have all the answers. And so at another company, we had our director of quality leave, and we had our new quality director come in from a different team and go from manager to director. And so changed title as well as changed department, and immediately thought, I know how to run this. I know what I'm doing, everything, just everybody follow my lead. And this leader was completely lost, had no idea what we were doing or our processes, but thought, all right, I'm in the position of boss, I'm in charge, and these are the actions we're going to take. 8 out of 11 employees left that department within the first year. So
Wow.
Turnover was extraordinary, and this was not a high turnover environment, but because of that leadership approach, everyone jumped ship. And that was just very powerful to say, okay, unless you take that servant leadership approach, there is going to be devastating repercussions.
Okay. Those are some staggering numbers.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I like what you said there, and I saw everybody else's facial expressions when you said it, so I know they liked it as well. And I think that we maybe need to spend some time on that. And I think Mike kind of alluded to this in his intro, is that you don't always have all the answers, and and it's okay. It's okay to not have all the answers, because that's kind of what we're here for today. Is, number one, we're here to hopefully send a message to organizations that you need to do more to help your leaders be ready and to help them take that step forward. And yeah, I was just reading an article this morning about succession planning, and you need to be more strategic in your strategy towards how are you going to promote. Do you know who that next person is? Are you hiring with that in mind? But then, from the new person's perspective, if you're watching this and you're a new leader, that's kind of what we're here to say, is it's okay to not have all the answers. Don't feel judged because you don't. Will you be judged because you don't? Maybe, possibly, but those probably aren't your people. Your people are the people who are helping you get better, no matter whether they're above you or below you in the chain, or they're your peers side to side. So anyway, I think that's powerful, Kevin. And I have been fortunate from two perspectives. Number one, I've had a lot of really great leaders who have seen my potential and have said, hey, here's a path forward for you. And then I've always been a curious person. And so those are the two things that I will say I've had in my favor, is I will go out and learn something. Specifically, if I don't know something, Google is my favorite app. And I'm constantly Googling things, say, okay, wait a second, what did they just say? But also, I've had really good leaders who've put a boot in my behind to say, hey, this is the direction you need to go down. And so I'm curious, Meredith. I know I said I wanted. I'm interested in your industry because I don't know much about it. And so, can you talk just for a minute? I know you're kind of the new kid there, so maybe you don't feel like you know all the answers, but the question that I posed to Kevin was, do you see certain industries where it's absolutely impossible for a leader to take a day and go and live the day of the life of. And so from your perspective, you know, in the military, it is possible to say, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to turn some wrenches with these guys today. So the solar industry, can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities you're seeing there?
There's a lot, and it's exciting. I never thought that solar and renewables would have so much into it, but there is. For me, what I do a lot of community outreach as well. I'm developing these sites, and there are times where we are next to someone and we need to go let them know, hey, we do have this property and this is our plan and this is what we're doing with it. The good, bad, and indifferent. And it's understanding their shortfalls and where they see maybe a concern and kind of putting that at ease and assuring them that this is safe, this is okay, this is a good thing. We're not going to bring your property value down. We're not going to have any, once it's built, there's not going to be any traffic on your road. It's going to go back to the way it was. It's relatively, for the most part, very quiet. You won't hear any additional noise than what you're hearing right now. But the one thing I've seen is I have a director currently who I look at from, especially being in the military, I still associate things with a chain of command. So he is my company commander. I look at him. I'm like his XO. He's my company commander. And he will come out with me on these site visits. He's always available to go with me. And a lot of times these places, I do a lot of work in Southwest Florida. So he has no problem assisting me and going out there and meeting county commissioners, different local businesses. We use them a lot for some of our, we'll hold like a thank you event. We just did one in DeSoto County where we did this big thank you to the neighbors and nobody came out. And which is a good thing in our books, that means that there may not be an issue with them. But we did have one neighbor show up who was very happy to see us, and we really enjoyed talking with them. So it's great to see him get out there and understand where they're coming from. So if I were to bring information back and say, Matt, I'm struggling in this county. It's not, well, why is that? Where can we essentially not really throw money at it, but how do we make it better? What kind of outreach can we do? Is there a sponsorship we can involve ourselves in? I can tell you in April, we're going out to the local schools to go read books, and we do a lot of donations to the local school communities, especially in these low income areas. So he's very familiar with it. And my boss above him, my battalion commanders, what I look at him as is he's also willing to get out there and go with you on these site tours to go look at it. And that's my favorite part of the job is always to get out of the office and to go take a look at these sites. It may just be a piece of land, but to envision as to what it can be and how you're going to turn it into. And for the most part, we do a lot of ag work on there. So we're leasing the land out to cattle owners, farmers. You get to go see their operations. It's pretty daggone cool. I love it. And I love that my bosses still want to get out there with me and go walk me through it. And it's a lot of reminiscent time on their time there as well.
What I'll be interested in is, from a leadership perspective, 6 months or a year from now, to hear what you've learned from that industry, because I will firmly stand behind the fact that I think that the greatest tool in a new leader's toolbox is that leader, that mentor standing behind them and making sure that they have the courage to ask the questions and to really make mistakes and learn from them. I think the hardest part is when you make mistakes and you're not given the opportunity to learn from them. That's a huge failure of leadership, in my opinion. And I think Mike has shared some stories about that in the past. And in previous episodes, Mike has shared the example of that you're doing it right when they're not afraid to challenge you on things, when they're not afraid to talk to you about things. And so, Mike, you've shared a couple examples in the past about folks who have challenged you to say, "Hey, that I just didn't like that," or "you messed that up." But I'm curious, do you when you're building that relationship, do you see it in the reverse as well, where you've done something and they come to you to tell you how that impacted their life positively?
Not as frequent as I hear how negatively when I've done something wrong. But I mean, I wouldn't say I hear it as directly as I can see it. right? Like when I've done something that has made it easier on them or something that has improved the process, I see the success in our metrics, right?
Mhm.
I see it being rolled out easily. I see people grasping onto it, you know, moving it. That's more of where I see the success and I see the acknowledgement of what I've done. Um, a lot of times I will have some staff that will call me and say, "Hey, that was good," or bring it up in a meeting in a program meeting. They like to bring out the good in program meetings, but when it's something that, and I've always said, you can yell at me, curse me all you want, just don't do it in front of people. So
Yeah.
they always bring the negative directly to me. So it's a phone call, an email. If they see me in the office, they'll say, "Hey, can we talk?" Um, but yeah, I do get it. I get it in different ways, but yeah, the majority is always on the on
Well,
the.
I knew the answer and I asked it on purpose because to make a point, for new folks coming up in leadership, you're not always going to get the, hey, you did a great job yesterday. Sometimes your positive feedback is in the form of you still have a key to the building. When you go to clock in, your time clock still recognizes your number. And I think when, as you're coming up, I think back to myself when I was, first promoted in a leadership role. There's always that constant anxiety of, did I do the right thing? Did I lead from the right perspective? And you're constantly waiting for, that feedback of, okay, here, and here's why. My exposure to growth and development was in the Army, where we did meeting after meeting after meeting to intentionally teach. And it was really that strategic leadership from the, we're going out on this mission. Here's what we hope to achieve, to the after action review when, okay, we did the mission. Here's how it went. Here's the high points. Here's the low points. Starting next week, this is the training that we're going to do so that we can get better at these things that we didn't execute very well. So I had that as my kind of roadmap. And when you enter the business world, that just doesn't exist in a lot of organizations. And so I asked that question intentionally, knowing what the answer was going to be, because you're not going to walk in the morning and get a bullet point of, here's what you did well yesterday. Most often, you're going to get a bullet point of, here's what we need to do better today. The metrics are telling us this. What are we doing to drive, more sales? What are we doing to drive, more billing hours? Whatever it is that your KPI is. That's, I don't want a new leader to get frustrated because they're not getting the feedback that they need. What I've advised folks to do is keep it pretty simple. If you're new to a leadership role, you take the initiative at least once a week to communicate directly with whoever it is that's deciding your fate, to say very clearly, what did I do last week that you liked so I can do more of it? What did I do last week that you didn't like so I'll do less of it? And then what are some of the opportunities as a team that you'd like me to focus on? And leave it at that. And whatever the answer is, that will help guide the path of, you'll know very quickly whether they're happy or not happy with your specific performance. And I've had leaders react a variety of different ways when I've asked that question. And usually, and I think you have to read this very carefully, but I've had leaders react frustrated to the question, where they've I've gotten what I will call a lashing out answer of, well, just worry about this. And what I have learned is I can never take that personal, that was directed at me. What I have to do is take a step back and say, okay, something is, and it could be in their personal life. It's what I've learned is when they're ready to talk to me about it, they will. But for now, I'm just going to get back and I'm going to do my thing. So just, and Kevin, as I was rambling on, I was thinking to myself, I know I lean heavily on you for the data because you've just recently, been down that path of different research models to validate whether or not, certain things are working or employee engagement is happening. Just from a curiosity perspective, my thought process when I tell people, just ask 3 simple questions to determine and gauge how you move forward. What are you seeing out there from an employee engagement, or even, specific to this topic, supervisor engagement?
I I don't necessarily have as much grounded data, but your comment of if you don't hear anything, sometimes that's good, and having the key to the building means you're doing something right. I think that's where uh, frontline leaders, especially new frontline leaders, sometimes miss the mark in that I'm teaching at a university, and in my classes, I don't realize how much I would call them my students, but you would associate that with your employees, cling to some of your words or some of the feedback. In that I'm grading papers, and I'll look back at some of the papers. Everything I put is negative. It's only what they're making a mistake on. And so some of these papers are wonderful, but the only comments or only areas that I focus on are the negative. And so highlighting, all right, these are the success points. So I've had to go back and highlight there's no documentation on this because it's extraordinary. It's positive. This is a great area that you focused on. But because as a society, we are obsessed with, all right, what can we do better? Where can we improve? Highlighting the positive is imperative. And this is from academic standpoint, but also it relates to being in corporate work life also. And so I don't necessarily have data on that, but that is a key challenge because well, I need to make people work harder, do better, less mistakes. People get worn out when all it is negativity.
My advice to a new leader would be what Meredith mentioned previously is take the time to get to know your people. And you really got to get in deep with them to just let them talk. I think some takeaways from this, first is the relationship. You are the leader now, and you have to build a relationship to get to know your people, to take care of your people. And one of the most powerful conversations that I think you could have is, how can I help you take your career to the next level? Where do you want to go? And I think that all too often a mistake is made where leaders think that the person wants to be promoted or they want a pay raise. And I think as a leader, you cannot expect your people to have the courage to tell you these things. You have to ask enough questions to get to know them and really to let them get to know you. That's the takeaway, is get to know your people. And then if you're that person who is the new leader, you are in charge of your development. I don't think you cannot rely on anybody else. You have to learn. You have to take those steps to read books, to take classes, watch YouTube videos like the one you're watching now, to help you to develop those skills. Mike, the idea of this subject was yours, so I'll toss it back to you to see if you have anything to add outside of the two takeaways of be the guy who gets to know your people and be a learner.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can add is where you and Kevin had discussed, like seeking the knowledge and utilizing your leadership. Seek out mentorship. You being comfortable utilizing supervisions, right? If you have that supervision time, asking those questions. That's what supervision's for. I've always been the person that felt preemptive strike, right? So if I think I did something wrong, I want to tell you about it. So I'm going to tell you in supervision, hey, I did X, Y, and Z. This is why I did it. What are your thoughts? And I've also had where my supervisor or my supervision just wasn't enough, seeking out mentorship within the agency, within the field. I have a mentor who's in the tech field, has nothing to do with me. But it's somebody I can contact and bounce ideas off. Seeking that out from different areas is also a positive. I have mentorships who are in quality assurance, compliance, labor relations, right? These are small aspects of my job, but it helps to improve my job and gives me different ways of viewing the same problem. So, I mean, is any new supervisor or supervisor new to a role, and that qualifies, becoming a director, C-suite, moving up. Seek that out. Because if you don't seek it out, you're going to be stuck to flounder and you're going to be stuck wondering how you're doing. And ambiguity is not good for anybody in general or your mental health to not know, because you're living in constant stress, or if you're on the other side, you're just lucky and living super happy and screwing up. So yeah.
Yeah, some real valid points there, Mike. So Meredith, as the newest leader to the table, I'm just curious, and the inspiration for this show. Any questions that you think a new supervisor would be asking, or anything we're missing here to help these new supervisors? And maybe you're not the supervisor, maybe you're the person on the team. Anything we're missing from a contribution perspective?
I think you all hit it on the head. John, I loved when you just said you're in charge of your own development, that you couldn't be more on the spot. Yes, I do rely on my team and my own supervisor to kind of help guide me along the way, but I would be doing a disservice to myself to not look into all the materials. One thing I really love about the environment that has been created at that office is it gives you the opportunity to go walk around, go meet different people in other business units. It's networking, but two, especially when I go to my stakeholders in environmental engineering, real estate, it gets them thinking, oh, Meredith needed this thing. Well, let's just talk about it right here. That frees up an hour of my day of a formal meeting schedule, and we can just knock it out right here and it's done. And then we can all check it off. There's so many things that you can take forward with this. And if you have to kind of get out of your shell a little bit. It's uncomfortable. It can be scary at times, but it's the most beautiful relationship you'll develop within yourself and with other people. And it gets other units thinking about you, because another thing is this corporation is a lot like the military. You can stay there for 30 years and you can work the same job if you want, or you can move laterally, horizontally, in whichever direction you want to go. And it's a beautiful organization. I love the way they had it set up. So, you can go transition over into environmental if you want. And I might not know the first thing about environmental, but I'm a hard worker and I'm willing to get out there and read the products and go read the books and go talk to people and meet the state departments and the federal departments and understand what they're looking for. It's a great organization. And then, Michael, I loved when you talked about seek out mentorship. And I want to plug John really quickly. I know I told him I was going to do it beforehand, but thank you, John. I sought him out when I was transitioning from the military. He's been a pivotal individual for my growth, and you are the reason I took this jump. I had no confidence in myself that I would ever be in renewable energy or green energy, and here I am. It's a great industry to be in, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of these talks. I'm honored to sit on these panels. I think about you all very often. I use a lot of your advice, especially the last one that we did. I take a lot of notes during these, and I constantly look back at them. Just something for John's note. He was probably the only mentor I had that really said, go, reach big. And even if they tell you no, it's okay. At least you tried. And thank goodness you said that, John, because I wouldn't have done it otherwise. So thank you for giving me that confidence to push me forward. And I just really appreciate these chats. Sorry, I know I got a little off topic, but I get excited to be invited to these. It really is an honor.
Well,
we got to bring you to more. That's why you're less excited.
Yeah, well, let me flip that back around, Meredith, to you to say thank you, because I mentor a lot of people to the point that I don't even know what the number is off the top of my head. And I tell them all the same thing. Most of them I've met through Veterati. And at the end of that call, I say, here's my cell phone number. You don't have to use Veterati to reach out to me. Text me, call me. Whenever you need help, just reach out. I'll be there. It's so easy to mentor somebody when they're as bought in as you are. And when the person does the work, it makes my job easy, because all I really have to do is sit back and listen and ask questions. And, Meredith, I will never forget. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina one time when you called, and you had two offers on the table. And I'll be honest, I didn't even listen once. I didn't listen to the whole part of the solar offer. But the moment I realized your offers on the table were a retail option or a non-retail option, and I said, don't go retail, whatever you do, don't. And I said, trust me, as a guy who spent 30 years in retail, don't do it. And it's awesome to see how happy you are in this role. And so I thank you for the hard work that you've put in, because you are an example that I can point to other mentees to say, when you do the work, here are the results that you get to enjoy. So thank you for that. Sorry for my long digression as well. So Kevin, I want to come back over to you. The staying on a little bit on topic of advice, guidance that you would give to that new supervisor coming up to help them be a better leader.
Yes. So a stat that is staggering is that the average age of a first-time manager is 30, but the average age when people first embark on formal leadership is 40. So we're looking at a decade of leadership that you are learning on the job, but no formal guidance and direction. And so when you think about that, that is a potential for a decade loss of quality leadership in your career. And so advice for a frontline leader, a first-time manager, the onus is on you to figure out what type of training you need to be successful. You're not going to have all the answers. There are people that are more innately gifted at leadership, but you need to build, you need to work, you need to develop your skills. And so for me, if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to be proactive about developing those skills. He's a natural leader, she's a natural leader. That's great. You need to build on that because there is too much to know just inherently. You need to grow those skills and develop.
Being okay with being uncomfortable, self-motivator, find even if it's not like searching out the YouTube or searching out assessments of how am I a good leader, seeking the feedback, seeking the support. However, because we also have to remember learning styles, right? Somebody might be an auditory learner and reading a book is not going to benefit. But just figuring out how you are as the best leader, trial and error. I've had many experiences where I've tried to be innovative and fell on my face. As long as I wasn't harming our clients, myself, or other staff, it's a learning experience. I don't know many leaders that don't take that view of somebody trying to take the initiative. So feel free to be uncomfortable, because without discomfort, no change will happen. Get over yourself. Nobody's perfect. So even if you are that good natural leader, there's still some place you're probably struggling. And I've always found it, if it's something I'm uncomfortable doing, guess what? I can probably identify that that's a place I'm struggling, as long as it's the right thing, doing the right thing and it's uncomfortable. So yeah, so just your body's going to tell you what you need. You just need to find the solution.
I like that, Mike. Thanks. I think we all need that reminder, is stop taking yourself so seriously. Have fun in life. Laugh a little bit. And more importantly, be okay with laughing at yourself. Trust me, other people are laughing at you. You may as well enjoy it too. Glad you like that, Kevin.
That was good. Yes.
But they say if you're not laughing, they're laughing at you. If you're laughing, they're laughing with you.
Yes. So as we wrap this up, I do just want to put some plugs out there. If you've seen some of my more recent LinkedIn posts, I have taken the liberty of putting Kevin Phillips out there and saying, hey, if you're having troubles with this inside your organization, this guy can help you. I've never really asked Kevin if I have permission to do that. I've just kind of done it, and he hasn't called me up and yelled at me. So
you're good. Keep pushing if you want, John. 100%.
Appreciate it. But I very seriously mean it. So if you're watching this video and you're a part of an organization that's struggling, if people are leaving too fast, or the unfortunate is people aren't leaving fast enough sometimes, I think Kevin is a great person to help you in terms of recharging your workforce. Because, although it's in my best interest for you to want to find a new job, one of the things I'm pretty outspoken about is fixing where you're at is the best way forward. And I think Kevin's the guy that can help you do that. He's done extensive studies into happiness in the workplace. And so reach out to Kevin. His contact information, as always, is just below this video. LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to Kevin. He's out there every day, constantly putting thought leadership ideas out there. And to everyone else, we do two different shows here on this YouTube channel. One is Casual Conversations, and that is geared more toward people who are making a change in the world. I focus a lot on authors because they've written a book, they've published something to help the world be a better place. But if you're out there doing something remarkable and you don't feel like you're getting the traction that you need to get, reach out to me. Let me know. We'll put a show together. We'll talk about the contribution you're making to the world. And then the Leadership Roundtable is the more popular of the shows because we get out here and we just talk about stuff that impacts daily life, daily leadership. If you're interested in being a part of the Leadership Roundtable, don't hesitate to shoot me a note. Generally, we'll just have a quick conversation about how do you feel like you want to change the world. And the other option I'll throw out there is maybe you don't want to change the world, but maybe you have some valuable insight as a user and you just want to jump on the show and ask questions. We're wide open to that. Like, subscribe, share this, comment, whatever you feel. We're really grateful for your support. These topics are really important to me, and it goes back to a subject that we've talked about before, is being the leader that you needed. And I think, Mike, this subject kind of goes along those lines. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I appreciate you pushing it to the front. And I think that I'd like to toss that challenge out there to this group of panelists or anybody who's watching right now. If you'd like to jump on and have a conversation about moments when you needed to be the leader that you didn't have, I'd like to have that conversation, because I think there's a lot of folks out there who are in situations where they need that leader, or they needed that leader, or they had to become that leader in the moment. And so if you think you can add value to that conversation, reach out to me. I am not hard to find. Literally, my phone number and my email address are plastered just about everywhere. And you can reach out to me through comments as well. So I would like to thank this group for joining me. Always grateful that you get up really early on a Saturday morning to talk to me, and then I never shut up when I tell you I'm going to shut up. And you're patient with me, so thank you for that.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.